This is ABTV, Animal Bites Television. For animal lovers, by animal lovers.
Hey, Brian from SnakeBytes here. Today, I'm going to take you into the dark world of leopard geckos. You're watching SnakeBytes. Leopard geckos certainly occupy a tremendous amount of my time as my colony continues to grow. I absolutely love these little buggers, but the truth is, I didn't always do tremendously well with leopard geckos. The first few times that I got into them, I kind of failed at it and didn't produce very well. And I gotta be honest, Lori was far from supportive.
But I just think it was a pleasant surprise that I picked them up, don't you?
There was no pleasant surprise.
Laura, are you seriously
You're an idiot.
You still got your,
Idiot.
albino No, I'm serious though. Are you really mad? I need to know.
If it was left up to you, they'd still be in the boxes.
No, they wouldn't.
Yes, they would.
This is my baby. This is my pet project. I'm going to be pumping leopard geckos out.
Everybody listen. Nobody look or touch or feed those leopard geckos. They're all Brian's. He's doing it all by himself.
I'll show you when I'm producing babies like crazy.
I'll look, because I'll look every week or so to mark down all the dead.
So I'm guessing you didn't tell her that you got them.
No, that was good. No, I think she took it well. I think that it's going to be good. I'm excited about this project.
What was the first morph of leopard gecko that Brian hatched? A, Max Snow, B, Tremper albino, or C, white and yellow? Go ahead and answer down below in the comments and check back later in the show to see if you have the right answer. In this week's Reptile Report Spotlight, we'll be highlighting Reptiles Canada. Go ahead and check out the URL down below or click on the link in the description. So a year and a half ago, I decided that I was going to get a little more serious and give leopard geckos a good go. And this time, I actually had Lori's support, which was really cool. And believe it or not, this animal here is what started my whole new colony. My good friend Matt Baronic from Sassaback Reptiles actually gave me this animal for free, along with a couple other females. It happens to be a white and yellow Tremper head eclipse. What a cute little bugger it is, isn't it? And this is a male, and it certainly has fathered a lot of animals that are now in this rack. So over the last couple years, I've just really been working hard at building this colony, growing a bunch of animals up, trying to get as diverse as I possibly can get. And I'm going to be honest with you, when you work a project with reptiles, especially one that you haven't worked with before, it's always a little bit nerve-wracking. You think, am I going to be successful? Honestly, I grew up close to 1,000 leopard geckos. That's a lot of time, energy, and certainly money. And going into this breeding season, the doubt started to creep into my mind. Was I going to be successful? What if I produced a bunch of slugs? Or what if I put these guys together and I didn't even get one egg? I mean, could you imagine? And I tell you what, speaking of eggs, I guarantee you there's eggs in this box right here. You can always tell because the females will mound up this cocoa fiber. That's where they're going to hide them, and they're always in the corners, so you just have to kind of excavate really gently and see what happens here. Look at them right there. That's the guys, little eggs. I tell you what, this year has been absolutely so exciting to finally produce a bunch of geckos. Where are you going, buddy? You trying to get out? So I can't wait to share some of the cool babies that we're starting to hatch. But again, it all starts with eggs. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what we do next. So now that we know we have leopard gecko eggs, we've got to do something to them in order to get them to hatch, right? Now, we've spent some time talking about leopard gecko incubation in the past. I just want to breeze over it really quickly with you guys. We just use these deli cups right here, and in the bottom, you can see there's this material right here. It's called Hatchite. It's actually perlite with a water isomer actually mixed in it. So what's great is you literally open the bag up, you pour it in the cup, and that's it. You don't have to add anything whatsoever. Now, we also use these little containers here. These are actually from THG, which is pretty cool. It's just a little place to set your eggs in, keeps them compartmentalized. That way when they hatch out, you know exactly what female it is. So you can actually have 4 clutches right in the same tub. Because remember, they're going to lay 2 eggs per clutch. Well, occasionally they only lay 1, but they're typically going to lay 2. And basically all we do is just
pull the eggs out, just like this guy here. Look at how cool they are. And you can tell these guys are pearly white eggs, which is really what you want. And again, what's interesting with leopard geckos is that I've talked about snakes where the embryo actually attaches to the top. You've got to be careful not to rotate them. Well, fortunately with leopard geckos, that's not the case. Believe it or not, you can roll them and they'll still hatch fine. But you know what? I still am a snake guy, so I don't roll my eggs no matter what. We just basically put them in here. We're gonna mark them. But you know what's really cool about leopard geckos is that you can actually manipulate what sex the animals are by what temperature you incubate the eggs. It's called temperature sex determination.
Temperature sex determination is a type of environmental sex determination in which temperatures experienced during embryonic development determine the sex of the offspring. It's most prevalent and common among amniote vertebrates that are classified under the reptile class, as well as some megapods such as the Australian brush turkey. The eggs are affected by the temperature at which they are incubating during the middle 1/3 of embryonic development. This critical period of incubation is known as the thermosensitive period. The specific time of sex commitment is known due to the several authors resolving histological chronology of sex differentiation in the gonads of turtles with temperature sex determination.
So this is how it works with leopard geckos and temperature sex determination. Basically, if you incubate at about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to get almost all females. If you incubate at 89 or 90 degrees, you're going to get almost all males. And of course, if you do it right in the middle at 84, 85, you're going to get a split. Now here, we actually incubate 80% female and 20% male, because obviously a male can breed a lot of different females. But this is what's so exciting. It's finally hatch season. That's right. Eggs will typically hatch at about 60 days if you're incubating them at 80 degrees. And guess what? It's been hatching like crazy the last couple weeks. So I'm gonna go ahead, just show you what might come out today. Now these guys all are potentially hatching and they've been kind of getting rolling just over the last couple weeks. I tell you, it's been a great time to wake up each day and just see little baby geckos hatching. And as you can see right here, these guys have just come out and you can see how these egg trays work so well. As soon as they hatch, they stay in this little compartment, and then we know exactly which animals actually produce them, which is so important. Again, I always say that way if some kind of freak of nature hatches and it's just like, holy cow, you can go back and say, this is the cage that it came from. But there's only a couple geckos in this one here. Again, they're just getting rolling. Let's check this tub here, see if we got some geckos. Oh my gosh, this is like the mother lode here. There's all kinds of little geckos that have just hatched out. I tell you, it's like Christmas every day when you wake up and you come in here and you see all these little baby geckos. But hey, let's go ahead and set them up. I've got a lot to show you guys when it comes to geckos today. All right, so now that we have some of these beauties hatched out, we obviously have to set them up. And what makes leopard geckos such amazing pet animals is the simplicity of how you can keep them. Now, of course, we keep them in a rack system in shoe boxes, but you can keep them in a 10-gallon aquarium pretty much their whole life, which is pretty cool. To keep a handful of them, you might have to go up to a 20-gallon, but it's pretty simple. We actually use paper towel as a substrate in ours because it's really easy to clean, and then we can actually spray them down a little bit, and the paper towel will retain some of that moisture. You got to remember that these guys are from the desert, so they typically won't drink water. Although we do put a water dish in with them, they're going to really drink that dew and stuff like that. But regardless, it's a pretty simple setup. Again, paper towel. We actually use these hide boxes right like this. These are just like little sandwich things for meat or whatever, and we actually break them in half, just snap in half like this for the babies. Now, when we get bigger ones, sometimes we'll use the hole and just cut a hole out in it, but half it goes in the back here because, again, you want a nice spot for them to hide. It gets the stress level down. They're happy that way. Plus, the humidity will actually be a little higher in there, kind of like a cave system. The only other thing we really do, we put a water dish. Again, I told you, they really don't drink, but I'm sorry, I just have to put a water dish in with an animal. I don't know, it's just so hard for me not to. And then these guys will actually eat little mealworms. Now, these mealworms look like they're pretty big for that little tiny gecko, but believe it or not, they'll crush them just the size. So we feed medium mealworms right off the bat. Now the truth is, for about a week or so, these geckos really aren't gonna eat very much because they got the yolk from their egg. But in about a week, they need mealworms, and we don't really mess with crickets too much. Now all we do is basically put these little guys in the cage. Yeah, little bugger, there's your new little home. And again, because I know exactly what clutch it's produced from, I can actually mark it right on the cage. In this case, it actually is K10. Now the only other thing that I'm going to do before I shut this cage is I'm going to put some vitamin powder in. Now this is a mixture of Vionate and calcium. They need a lot of calcium, but they also need other vitamins as well. It really helps the mealworms. And I just literally powder the mealworms just a little bit with the Vionate. It's going to give them all that they actually need. And again, this mixture is actually 3 parts Vionate to 1 part calcium. And that's pretty much it, guys. Now you have to go back through once, maybe twice a week, give them a little bit of spray, make sure their water's fine, make sure they've got fresh mealworms. And that's pretty much it. What a simple and easy animal. And I tell you what, there are some amazing paint jobs too. I'm going to go ahead and show you them right now. So before we talk about all the cool leopard geckos that we're starting to hatch, I want to talk about how we get those paint jobs. There's really 3 simple genetic things going on with leopard geckos. The first one would be, and listen to those little buggers, they just love to scream at you. Oh, look, calm down. Is that the cutest thing ever or what? This happens to be a Tremper albino, which is a recessive mutation. So basically the way recessive mutations work is that when you have a normal or wild type phenotype that you're breeding to a color mutation or a paint job, you're gonna get all babies that look wild type or normal, but then when you breed them back, a percentage of the babies, anywhere from 25% if you're breeding head to head, or 50% if you're breeding recessive to head, and believe it or not, 100% if you're breeding recessive to recessive will be albino. So there's a handful, that guy is just so cool, there's a handful of recessive mutations in leopard geckos. Then there's some dominant and co-dominant mutations. Another one of those screamers, listen to that guy. I just absolutely laugh every single time I hear that. This happens to be a Mac Snow. And I guess when you're a little gecko like this, you gotta have those big vocal cords, right, to keep those predators away. So this happens to be a Mac Snow, and this is actually a co-dominant mutation, which means there's a superform. There's also a few mutations that are dominant, which means there's not a superform. But when you breed these, half the babies are gonna come out Snow right off the rip, so it's not like a or a recessive mutation that has a heterozygous trait. And lastly, there's something that's called polygenic, which is basically just a fancy word for line bred. So again, when you have a really orange animal, like a tangerine animal like this, you're gonna breed it to another tangerine animal, and it's gonna get better and better. And you always wanna take the best of that phenotype and continue to breed it in order to get the best babies. So that's basically how it works. And a lot of the mutations with leopard geckos happen to be polygenic, which means that you're just line breeding for the cool colors and cool patterns. I tell you what, there are some really cool paint jobs for sure. So let's just go ahead and take a look at some. So we've been hatching out hundreds and hundreds of leopard geckos, so obviously I can't show you everything, but I'm going to certainly show you a handful of stuff that I'm really excited about. Take a look at this animal here. Now this is an absolute beauty. It's a Mac Snow white and yellow. Again, the Mac Snow is co-dominant, and the white and yellow is actually dominant because there's no superform, but the combination of the two together make an absolutely stunning animal. And as it gets bigger, it's just going to only get better and better. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about leopard geckos, is that they're so cute as babies, just like this little guy here, but when they start to grow up, holy cow, do they get better. Now this happens to be a Mac Snow Tremper albino, and it's a really pretty one on top of it. Again, Mac Snow being co-dominant, the Tremper albino being recessive, which is just a normal albino type of trait. Now there happens to be a few types of albinos, and unfortunately they're not compatible. So if you breed the Bell albino to the Tremper or Rainwater, you'll actually get normal babies. So we really encourage people to keep their albino lines separate so it doesn't muddy the water whatsoever. Now this is a little guy here that's just a couple weeks old, starting to get a little bit of color in, and this is a hypo white and yellow. And again, that white and yellow gene is really a contrasting gene. It just changes the color tremendously and makes them really gorgeous. So again, the hypo gene is actually a polygenic or line bred trait. And of course, the white and yellow being a dominant trait. It just makes for some incredible animals. Again, sticking with white and yellows, take a look at this guy here. This happens to be a white and yellow Mac Snow Tremper albino. So that's 3 mutations going on here, but just look at how vibrant it looks. Man, when this thing reaches 25 or 30 grams, it's gonna smoke your eyes. It's gonna be so beautiful. Man, I'm just absolutely going crazy with these leopard geckos. Oh, and check this one out. This may be one of the coolest geckos that I've hatched so far this year. This is a Super Snow Tremper, white and yellow, or mostly called the Tremper universe. That means there's a whole lot of stuff going on in it, right? But just take a look at that animal. It's almost white. You can barely see the pattern in it. It's got those really, really awesome eyes. Whew, that's a beautiful animal. I was so excited when this one hatched out, and I just can't wait. It's getting nice and big, and it's getting more and more beautiful. That tail is plumping up. Man, that's a cool animal right there. Now this is pretty cool here. I really like this guy, and this one just hatched out, so it's just a little tiny guy right here, but he certainly has a big attitude for such a little guy. This happens to be a reverse stripe raptor. Now the raptors are actually red albino, patternless Tremper orange animals, and as they get bigger, they're breathtaking animals. Where are you at, little buddy? Whew, he's hiding on me. Hello, oh, there he is, underneath the paper. Sometimes these guys are a little tricky. Now this is a really cool animal here. This happens to be the bold stripe. Remember I told you before, which is basically that racing stripe that's a polygenic or line-bred trait. But this happens to be a white and yellow bold stripe, which makes the pattern really cool and really pop with the white and yellow. Again, the white and yellow being a dominant mutation that just makes color really different. Lots of yellows, lots of whites, hence the name. Look at the little guy. I tell you, it's so amazing that these geckos have such big attitude for such little guys. Now this is a really pretty animal right here, and it happens to be one of my favorite mutations, believe it or not. This is actually a patternless stripe animal. Now this is going to get a little complicated, guys, but basically when you start getting aberrant leopard geckos, when you start breeding those together, you can produce jungles, which are basically just a really apparent leopard gecko, right? Now if you breed jungles together, you can get reverse stripes, and then you breed them to stripes and you produce patternless stripes. And believe it or not, the patternless stripes can produce eclipse, which are the eye pigmentation. So I know there's a lot going on with this particular mutation, but look at how cool it looks. I just think they're one of my favorites for whatever reason. But the patternless stripes certainly should never be confused with the Murphy's patternless, which is what this is here. Now a Murphy's patternless is a recessive mutation on its own, has nothing to do with eclipse, patternless stripe or anything. It's just a simple recessive mutation. And ironically enough, when they first came around, these guys get pretty much patternless as adults. They were actually being called leucistics, but they're really far from leucistic. They're more of a gray animal, whereas leucistics would be pure white. And these are pretty cool, but again, recessive mutation. Now, enigmas are kind of an interesting mutation in the sense that I only have a couple adult females, and I'm probably never going to produce very many of them, and I'll explain why in a minute. But they're basically a co-dominant animal or a dominant animal because there's really not a superform, or at least not one that isn't lethal. And they're a pattern and color mutation. So when you breed enigma, half the babies come out enigma. Now the problem is, you can kind of see it wags its head a little bit. They sometimes run around in circles. They have some neurological glitches that are attached to the same protein on the same allele of the actual mutation. So unfortunately, you can't breed out the neuro issue. So I'll produce a few just because they're so cool looking, but I'll probably never really sell them or grow up a group of them because they're kind of a mutation that shouldn't really be propagated that much, at least, but man, they are cool looking. Now this is another cool one here. This is a tangerine. It's a polymorphic trait, which again means it's just a line-bred trait. So if you take the orangest animals and breed it to the orangest animals, you'll continue to get more and more orange animals or tangerine animals. So in the course of the year, I'll just kind of raise up a bunch of these, pick the best ones out, breed them back together, and just get better and better animals. And I tell you what, some of these guys when they're adults are unbelievably on fire. Now this happens to be a Tremper albino, and look at that little bugger, he is so mad. But this is an interesting one because it's got eye pigmentation, but not the same eye pigmentation as an eclipse. It actually has what's called a marble eye, which is a recessive mutation. So basically, this is a really beautiful animal in a tangerine Tremper, but also has that really strange eye pigmentation. Again, a mutation all on its own, and it happens to be recessive. Now remember me talking about the whole patternless stripe and on and on and on in eclipse? I'm going to kind of break it down right now for you. It starts with jungles. Now this happens to be a Tremper jungle, so it's an albino jungle, but you can see the jungle pattern is just kind of that aberrant pattern down the back of a leopard gecko. Now if you breed two jungles together, some of the babies are going to come out looking just like this, and this is actually what they call a reverse stripe. You can just see where that came from. It's a reverse stripe down its dorsal. That's the next step in the process. And actually, this is a pretty cool reverse stripe right here. This has got a couple other mutations attached to it. It's got a Mac Snow, a Tremper, and a reverse stripe. And look at that little guy. Now that's a beauty. I can't wait to see what that thing looks like when it's 25 or 30 grams. But when you breed those back together, you're going to get this animal right here, which is a patternless stripe. But this happens to be a snow patternless stripe, so it's got one more codominant, and again, that's really beautiful. Now the patternless stripes can be really variable. You can see there's quite a bit of pattern on that. Some are completely patternless, so they're pretty polymorphic is what they call them. And then this is the one step further, which is a patternless stripe, but it's an eclipse, which is when the eye pigment comes in. And basically that just means they have those really dark eyes and pigments. That is one cool animal. And the eclipse gene, being a recessive gene on its own, can go into other mutations and make all kinds of other stuff. And then lastly, I'm going to wrap out this rack with this animal right here. This is a super snow. I've showed you a bunch of snows. This is the super version. So when you breed snow to snow, on average, 1 in 4 babies are going to come out like this, nice and dark. When they're hatched, they're jet black, and they've got those white feet. What a gorgeous animal. What's so cool with leopard geckos is basically it's endless with the combinations. You can put different things together and get just crazy stuff. And it kind of is going to go that way for a long, long time. Just take a look at this animal here. This happens to be a bold snow Tremper albino. And again, if we go back what I've been saying, the bold is a polygenic trait, breeding for that really bold stripe pattern. Then you've got the snow that's codominant, and then of course the Tremper being albino, which just makes for a really spectacular animal. Check this one out here. This is actually that patternless stripe gene that I've been telling you guys all about. Well, this happens to be an albino Tremper patternless stripe. So again, when you just add one more gene, you've got that patternless stripe. That's so cool. But unfortunately, it takes a handful of generations to get there. Then you add the recessive into it, and bam, you've got something that's really cool. Take a look at this too. This is just a really pretty simple animal here. This is a tangerine Tremper albino. So again, what you have is that recessive mutation, pretty easy to produce, and then you're just breeding it into the orangest animals as possible to get beautiful animals like this. And again, with the tangerine stuff, they get bigger and better and better and better. So that thing's going to be really cool. As a matter of fact, this is another example of a really cool patterned hypo. Take a look at that right there. Happens to be one of my favorite geckos that I've hatched. Look at all that lavender and purple in it, and that's just big blotching. Now, I'll be honest, I really don't know what this pattern is, but unfortunately, it's in the hypo gene. So as cool as it looks now, it probably won't look nearly as cool when it's at 25 or 30 grams because all of that melanin is going to get sucked out with the hypomelanism gene. Let's take a look and see what look at that animal there. Whew. Now that is a beautiful leopard gecko. That happens to be a snow Tremper white and yellow. Again, a codominant mutation, a recessive mutation, and another dominant mutation together. But wow. Now that is crisp and beautiful, isn't it? I can't wait to see what this animal's going to look like in another 20 grams. Whew. Man, that's a ripper. What we have here is a Mac Snow Eclipse. Again, the Eclipse is that eye pattern, also a patternless stripe animal, and this happens to have the codominant gene, which is a Mac Snow attached to it. Makes for a really cool mutation. Definitely loving that animal a lot. Now this is a really pretty animal here. This is what they call an apter, which is basically just like the raptors without the red eyes. So it's basically the exact same animal genetically. It just doesn't have the red eyes that goes along with the raptors, and they call them apters instead, minus the other eyes, right? Now this one is really, it's probably the best animal that I think I've produced this year, as far as genetically anyways. This is actually a super snow white and yellow. And I really love the super snow animals. I think they're just really amazing. But when you put the white and yellow to it, it kind of looks like a Dalmatian. You know, it's just that white with the black freckling on it. And then you have that blue right around the eyes. Now that is one cool, cool animal. Oops, sorry little buddy. Back in there. Trust me, they're pretty durable. Now, again, this is an enigma animal here, and I talked about the enigmas a little bit earlier. And again, they're just such beautiful animals. It's a shame that they have that Nero glitch. You can kind of see how it's flipping around a little bit. That's just really typical for enigma. But this happens to be a Mac Snow enigma, and you can see how that mutation comes out. I mean, what a cool animal with those really dark eyes. But unfortunately, they just are a little bit weird, and something that probably won't propagate much. But again, really cool animals. Now, I tell you, for whatever reason, the Bell albino mixed with the white and yellow make for some incredible animals. This happens to be a phenomenal one. This is a bold striped bell, white and yellow. Holy cow, look at that thing. Now this thing just hatched, so it's a little teeny tiny baby. But I tell you what, when this thing gets to 10, 15, 20, 25 grams, oh my God, this animal may be one of the prettiest geckos that I'll be raising up this year. Just cannot wait to see what it looks like. This happens to be a patternless stripe, white and yellow. And again, we've saw a lot of patternless stripe stuff, but this is with the white and yellow dominant gene attached. And just look at the difference that it creates. That's pretty cool, isn't it? I just think that white and yellow gene is just such an enhancer for stuff. It's so cool to see all these geckos. Now this is a double recessive mutation here, which is really cool. We see it in corn snakes and ball pythons all the time, but you don't see it nearly as often with leopard geckos. This is a Tremper albino Murphy's patternless animal. So again, just to give you an idea how you have to produce this, it's 1 in 16 on average to produce the double recessive mutation. It's basically what they call a 9:3:1 ratio. So when you're only producing 2 eggs, it's a little hard to hit the double recessive when it comes to leopard geckos, but what a gorgeous animal it is, huh? Now this guy just hatched yesterday, as a matter of fact. He's just a little dude, but man, it looks incredible. This happens to be a Mac Snow Bell albino, white and yellow. Wow, that's going to be really cool. I've never actually seen one before. They might be out there, I have no idea, but I can tell you this much, that's one gorgeous animal. He's a little frail, so I'm a little bit concerned about him, but we've got some mealworms in. We're going to really pay attention to him, and hopefully he perks up and does well for us. This happens to be a patternless stripe, bell, white and yellow. Again, there's a lot of stuff going on with this one. You know the patternless stripes are a little difficult to get, then the recessive bell, and then of course the dominant white and yellow. But that's a really cool animal. When it gets bigger and that orange really pops, that's going to be a stunning animal for sure. Now, this is actually a really cool little animal here. This is actually just a Mac Snow, and again, look at the little screaming. This is just a Mac Snow jungle, but look at how the jungle just really breaks up the pattern and makes it really cool. And the Mac Snows I love because they kind of have that void of color, and you guys know in ball pythons I love the earth tones. Now that's as earth tone as it gets. That's right, little buddy, go back in your cage. And then lastly, guys, where my passion started for leopard geckos, when I was 15 years old, I saw my very first one in a pet shop, and they were very rare back then, and there were no mutations. This is a normal leopard gecko. And this is what I dreamt about so many nights when I was a kid. I tell you, I hope you guys have enjoyed all these leopard geckos as much as I have. I have a feeling that I'm going to spend the rest of the evening just playing with some geckos. Till next week, keep that passion for reptiles.
What was the first morph of leopard gecko that Brian ever hatched? If you answered C, white and yellow, you're 100% correct. Good job.
So there it is. As you can see, there's a lot of leopard geckos hatching, and I'm always Facebooking and tweeting my way through it. So make sure to follow me over at SnakeBytesTV. Until next week, you've been watching Snake Bites.
The two co-dominant genes put together, creating a super form, which is this guy here, an absolutely 100% zero-scaled animal, the silkback.
This is ABTV.